NZXT are back with a brand new case, and we're going to build an awesome 4K gaming PC to see just how well it stacks up. In this video, I'll be taking you through all the parts we selected for this build, showing you guys how to put it together from start right through to finish, and testing out the performance later on at 1440p and 4K to see if this build really cuts the mustard. Let's dive into it after a quick ad from today's video sponsor. Asus Republic of Gamers have teamed up with Mouse Skins for an incredible competition where you can quite literally design it and win it. They're looking for custom skin designs for their great Gladius 3 wireless gaming mouse. You can submit up to 4 different designs, and the winner, voted by the public, will receive a £1,000 cash prize, £100 Games Planet voucher, and some cool ROG merch. Plus with prizes for the runner-up. This is a competition you do not want to miss. Check out all the T's and C's and enter at the link below. We're going to come back to NZXT's brand new PC case a little bit later, because first I want to walk you through some of our other components, starting off with the motherboard, which lies at the heart of this build, and of course the processor we'll be pairing it up with. As you can see from the Z690 motherboard, we've gone for an Intl platform in this build, and we'll be using the brand new i7-12700K. With phenomenal clock speeds, great single and multi-threaded performance, it's one of the best gaming and productivity CPUs out there right now. I'll be installing this into the MSI MEG Z690 UNIFY. There's loads of great Z690 options on the market, and it can be hard to decide which one. We've written a web article looking at the best boards in the space, and MSI's UNIFY is one of those designs. With PCIe Gen 5 support, room for lots of Gen 4 NVMe SSDs, and the rear panel to end all rear panels, this is quite the board. You also get a built-in I/O shield and loads of CPU overclocking headroom, alongside a stealthy all-black aesthetic that is literally perfect for the build we're going for today. In order to install your Intel 12th gen processor, you need to lift up the arm and then pull back the socket cover, drop the processor into place with the golden triangle, made a bit of a mess of that, with the golden triangle on the processor in the bottom left corner of your socket. Push the cover down and your black plastic CPU cover will pop off. Keep this safe if you ever have to RMA the board or send it back or anything like that, and pop the arm back down. We're going to follow this up by next taking a look at the RAM or the memory. This right here is Corsair's Dominator Platinum DDR5, another component we've actually written a full review of. I'll give you some brief details in this video though. 2 16GB DIMMs gives us room for upgrades later, but the important dual channel performance advantages of the present. This Dominator kit is actually limited edition, so big shout out to Corsair for sending this over. And we've actually got DIMM 49 and 50, some of the first 2 DIMMs Corsair ever made. So sick. Pull back the clips on your retention slots, then slide your memory into place and click it down. You'll get a nice satisfying sound and your memory is all installed. We're then able to move onto the SSD, which is Samsung's 980 Pro. There's not many Gen 4 drives out there that I'd happily recommend, because some of them just don't offer the speeds that the Gen 4 interface can actually saturate. 2 drives that do though are the 980 Pro and Seagate's FireCuda 530, both fantastic choices. They're also both available in heatsink or non-heatsink versions with a range of capacities to suit your needs. I've got a 1TB drive today because I think that will work nicely for us, and we're going to install it, as you can see, into the top slot. We will need to permanently remove this nice M.2 heatsink. Sad noises. However, I think the integrated heatsink looks pretty cool and adds a nice Samsung touch to the build in keeping with the colour scheme. And then, believe it or not, we're finished up with what we can install outside of the case. It's now time to take a look at NZXT's brand new ATX case offering. This is their H7 Flow edition. Now, the new H7 lineup intends to give a case for pretty much everybody. You've got the H7 standard with the non-mesh front panel and a tempered glass side panel. You've then got the H7 Flow with a mesh front panel. This uses a basically identical design to what we saw with the H510 Flow. And then if that wasn't enough, there's also the H7 Elite, which has the RGB fans up front and the glass panel. And each of these come in different colorway options as well, for white or black, depending on what you're looking for. Sort of like Corsair have them with their 4000 and 5000 series. You get the normal, the airflow, and then the elite or the IQ, the RGB edition of the case. A really good way of going about things, and nice to see manufacturers giving people the choice as to which fans and other stuff they want as standard. Let's actually take a moment to have a look around the case. It's not often in our builds that we get a hotly anticipated case for the very first time. One thing I do like so far is it seems very toolless. You can take off basically all the side panels without a single screw. Glass panel, simply lodge your fingers in the gap up the top, pull nice and hard, and slide the panel out. With a bit of luck, we can then do the same with the rear panel. The only stipulation is you have to take the top panel of the case off in order to then release these rear panels. And then finally, when it comes to the front panel, you just put your fingers underneath, pull nice and firmly, there we go, and the front panel will come off with the integrated dust filter built into the panel, helping with obviously dust management, but also stopping you having loads of crappy clutter everywhere and dust filters that just get in the way. The one at the top, super thin too, which I like. This appears to be going pretty well so far, and if we spin the case around to the back, I'm glad to report there's more good news. We've got 2 cable channels, one on either side, resolving some of the qualms I've had with NZXT before over integrated cable management. You also, and this is a great touch, ever had it before where you're running a cable from here down this channel and it just wants to cut behind your motherboard tray? It looks awful from a cable management perspective. Not with this one. You've got a little tray, like a lip, that will hold your cables in, and with plenty of Velcro, you're pretty well covered. All the included I/O cables are run very nicely too, and if you get the RGB version, that's mounted in this area just here. Another thing I like, this just keeps getting better for NZXT, is the addition of mesh on the top of the power supply shield, meaning you can mount your power supply in a fan up or a fan down orientation. The motherboard tray is a nice basic design. You keep NZXT's signature cable tray. I think maybe they could have done something a bit different with this cover, made it maybe a little bit more 2022, but it's not a huge complaint. You've then got room for 360mm radiators at the top and at the front of the case. You can also pop some 140s in the top here as well for a 280mm config. We're going to look at that later. And then this airflow version comes with a 120 in the front and a 120 in the back. Before I conclude talking about the case, I want to have a bit of a moan. I'm sorry, NZXT, I think it's beautiful. It's a really, really stunning looking case, but manufacturers keep getting this one thing wrong. I'm buying the airflow version of the case. You've gone to the effort to take off the glass panel at the front, you've made the top mesh, you've added loads of airflow, but you've given me 2 fans. If I buy the non-airflow version, which is supposed to be worse for airflow, you give me 4. And at the back here is 120mm. This is meant to be one of your flagship cases, and for the airflow version, you're giving me a 120mm fan at the back and 1 at the front. Now I get it, people might go, well, they're pretty ugly. We'll buy the RGB one with the RGB fans instead. Or go to the effort of giving people on the airflow case some high-end fans. Just at least give me more than 2, and at least make them not tiny. That's my only request for this case. Otherwise, I like it so far, and for the build we're going for today, I think it's going to look pretty nice indeed. Actually, I've got one more point. Why don't manufacturers do an airflow version with the RGB fans? Who says that I want RGB and I don't want airflow? Corsair have nailed this with their recent IQ QL edition of the 4000D. Great case, everything I've ever wanted, and I think NZXT could really benefit by doing something a little bit similar. Right, next up, we're going to install the motherboard into the case, and to do this, I am going to lay the case down flat. That always makes your motherboard install a bit easier and allows access to the case in a much more simple way. Because we've got a brand new ATX case and an ATX motherboard, all the standoffs will be in the right place, meaning we can just slide the motherboard in and it will then rest on the included standoffs that are pre-installed. Use 8 of the included screws to secure the motherboard into place. You need no screw in the middle of the case with this one here because the standoff is raised, meaning no screw will fit, but it does help to hold the motherboard while you screw it down. Add all of those screws in and then we can go ahead and move on to the CPU cooler. In particular, I've gone for the NZXT Kraken X73. Now either we can mount this at the top of the case or at the front. I'm thinking that the front is going to be my preferred mounting orientation on the basis that there's room for the fans in front of this metal panel. That will make the clearance we need a bit less, and it'll also allow us to pop some of our own fans in the top of the case. Keeping the top of the case clear can be advantageous for cable management, but in all honesty, I think having it at the front just pulls in that nice cool air and prioritizes our CPU temperatures. Something I'm keen to do with our overclockable i7. We're going to pop the radiator behind this front panel and then screw through the fans into the rad to secure it into place, and then move on to the water block. 4 screws in each of our 120mm fans gives us a beautiful array of 3 fans up front that'll shine through the front panel and look fantastic. That's the other advantage to a front mount. I think it looks better when you look at your system later on. Something I'm quite valuing in this build, as I want the system to look as good as possible. To finish the installation, we're then going to pop this back plate through the rear of the motherboard, add on these male-to-male posts, and then slot the cooler with this included metal mounting bracket on top. A dab of thermal paste and some thumb screws to fasten everything down should in theory install our cooler. It's a bit more tricky because we're using the latest 12th gen Intl mounting, and this is a slightly older kit, but I think it should definitely be feasible. And the cooler, once it's on, is gonna look awesome. It's also gonna keep our CPU nice and cool, which is the whole point of the cooler after all. It's at this point in the build we can go ahead and move on to the GPU. And what other choice could there be for a system like this than NVIDIA's RTX 3080 Ti? Well, I guess you could go for the 3090 or 90 Ti, but although those cards are expensive like this is, they're a whole nother league. You'll pay $2,500 for a 3090 Ti, where a 3080 Ti can be found for half that, with not identical performance levels, but frame rates that aren't too dissimilar, especially for those who have never gamed at 1440p or of course 4K before. This Founders Edition card fits beautifully with the theme of our system and can actually be purchased. GPU prices have continued to fall and are getting closer and closer to MSRP. We talked about when they might get to MSRP in a recent video, which you can find in the cards section now. The 3080 Ti is also a fairly recent release from NVIDIA, and while their rumoured 4000 series, or whatever they call it, is on the horizon, you're not likely to feel too remorseful when you pick up a GPU this powerful for the prices you can currently find it for. The case does of course support super long GPUs. This is a more compact 3080 Ti design, but you can see there's bags of space left over, even with our 360mm rad. You could very easily fit in like an MSI Supreme or an Acer Strix, and maybe even a push-pull radiator at the same time. Loads of clearance in the H7, which is quite a long case. What we need to do is we need to hover the GPU over the PCI lane we're going to use. So for us today, that is around about here. That shows us we need to remove the second and third PCI lanes, which in this case don't have vents, they're all covered, giving, I think, a much cleaner aesthetic. We're going to take out those lanes, slide the GPU in and click it into place. We'll give it power in just a second. When we look at our power supply, another new release from NZXT. This is their C1000 Gold. Now NZXT have recognised, like many manufacturers, that power supply wattages are heading firmly in one direction, upwards. New GPUs are consuming a lot more power than the flagship cards from a few generations ago, making high wattage power supplies frankly a must in 2022. I'm sure whatever new cards AMD and NVIDIA bring to the table, and maybe even Intel in due course, will require more and more wattage. Plus with PCIe 5 on the horizon, it's certainly a good idea to get a high wattage power supply, especially for a build like this, which, let's face it, kind of needs it. The latest overclockable i7 and a 3080 Ti certainly not minimal when it comes to power consumption. This is 80 plus gold certified too, fully modular, and fits in with our signature NZXT design aesthetic. It's always nice to have a build where the theme is really in keeping, so great to see that we can do that here with all NZXT components wherever possible. We're going to go ahead and connect all the wires up to our power supply and plug this up to the motherboard. While we're here, I'm also going to pop on our 140mm fans at the top and rear of the case and get these wired up too. Once the power supply is all in and everything's wired up, I'm excited to see just how well this system performs. But first, there's one thing for it. We need to see just how good this system looks, which can only mean one thing. Roll that montage. Nice! So we've seen that the NZXT H7 Flow performs when it comes to aesthetics, but does it perform when it comes to airflow, temperatures, and provide us with a really great build as far as performance goes? Let's find out. On your screen now is a summary of all the different games that we tested out and the frame rates we achieved. As usual, I'll be diving in title by title, looking at each game in just that little bit more detail. The first of those games we'll be diving into is COD Vanguard. Here at 4K high settings with DLSS enabled, we pulled in just shy of 150 frames per second. 131 and 118 rounded off a solid suite of 90 and 99th percentile results, while visually it's got to be said the game looked really fantastic. DLSS here helped us to get around another 50 FPS, making it a fantastic addition in this NVIDIA oriented build. The positive results continued through to Forza Horizon 5, where here at 4K Ultra we got 95 FPS on average, with 88 and 84 for the 90 and 99th percentiles. We tested the game using the inbuilt benchmarking mode and tested at 4K across the board here, as we found it just provided the best results. In terms of Apex Legends, the next game on the list, here we tested at 4K high settings. This time we achieved again over 100 FPS, 128 frames to be precise, with strong 90 and 99th percentile results too. Halo Infinite, once again another positive story, and the next game we tested, 4K high settings give us 90 FPS on average. 4K games look phenomenal, and I really have to say that extra visual fidelity makes a massive difference. We also tested out Fortnite, but this time at 1080p competitive settings. We listened to you guys, and you guys want to see this title with everything tuned down a little bit to maximize frame rate. 1080p competitive settings give us 267 frames on average, with 238 and 211 for the 90 and 99th percentiles. A great competitive experience here, where we tested using both NVIDIA FrameView and MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner to actually gather the FPS data. The last game on the list is a bit of COD Warzone, more popular than Vanguard, and here at 4K high settings with DLSS set to performance mode, we got 109 frames per second. 109 FPS in one of the latest AAA titles at 4K. And with that, that wraps it up for the benchmarks today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.